We hit record. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to another webinar brought to you by Tayo. Tonight's topic is the state of immigration, what you need to know. Really excited to have this featured panel of experts and community advocates as part of this, all alumni of the Filipino Young Leaders Program. I'm Lizelle Tang Lau. I am one of the co-founders of Tayo, project director, as well as a FYLPRO immediate past president. Just a quick couple things before we get started. Wanted to tell you a little bit more about FYLPRO, which is a network of young, high-performing next-generation leaders who advance the Philippines and the Filipino people through their advocacy and expertise in various industries. Here you can see kind of our mission statement and what we do as an organization. And Tayo, which is the project that is organizing this particular webinar. It is a project of FYLPRO. It's an innovative data hub that empowers Filipino ex-AO communities by collecting data, fostering partnerships, publishing culturally relevant insights, and developing leaders to create an equitable and sustainable future. I also want to add that this webinar is brought to you in support by NCAPA, which is the National Council for Asian Pacific American Association. It is through their support we are able to bring this programming to all of you here tonight. And then just a little bit more about Tayo. We started out as a rapid response to the pandemic. We saw a lot of misinformation being shared among our families and our friends, and we wanted to do something more to help combat that. Since then, 5 years, 5 years later, we are still battling misinformation, but we've expanded beyond just COVID and more the public health aspect and media literacy. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to our esteemed panel of speakers to talk about the state of immigration and for them to introduce themselves. So I'll hand it off to, I think, who's going first? Nanor Wong from the Legal Clinic. All yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Nanor. I'll give a very brief background about myself. I'm an immigration attorney here at the Legal Clinic based in Honolulu, Hawaii. I work on a number of immigration matters ranging from adjustment of status applications, naturalization applications, to removal defense, bond hearings. And so I will begin by talking about detention. So in Hawaii, ICE does not have a dedicated immigration detention center. Most non-citizens detained locally are held at the Federal Detention Center in Honolulu, and they're often mixed in with other criminal detainees, people who were either convicted or charged with federal crimes. A number of detainees here are also transferred from the mainland, including people from California, which is what we're seeing more and more of. The problem with doing that is the distance creates a major challenge for family contact and definitely access to legal representation. If you already have an attorney in California and you're sent to Honolulu, it's a lot harder to coordinate speaking and visits. Green card holders, people with a pending status, like pending applications with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and people with no status, they can all be detained at a detention center for a variety of reasons. One of them, the more common ways, is for having a criminal charge that makes someone inadmissible or deportable under the Immigration and Nationalities Act. People who have overstayed a visa, for example, if you were admitted with a B2 visa as a tourist and you've stayed well before that, you could be detained. Other reasons people would be detained include a failed interview with USCIS, thus making you out of status. Um, what we're seeing more now as well is if someone is detained at the airport just from arriving soon after, they might be placed in what we call expedited removal proceedings. And they, depending on their circumstances and whether they express a fear of returning home, would be subject to a credible fear interview. So I'm going to go over now what rights detainees have. They have the right to access to counsel. In many cases, they have the right to a bond hearing. And in some instances, they have the right to apply for a certain relief, even after they've been put in expedited removal. It depends on the facts of every case. So I think what most of the people would be worried about is, I don't want to go into federal detention center in the first place. What can I do? You should have documentation of your lawful status or of your pending applications with you at all times, whether the hard copy, a copy of it, or even on your phone. So it's a good idea to keep your passport with you if you have a US passport, a naturalization certificate when you're traveling, even a US birth certificate to prove that you are undoubtedly a US citizen, or a green card if you have lawful permanent residence. You should also, if you don't have any of that, carry proof that you have been in the United States for more than 2 years, because if you have that kind of evidence, then you won't be placed in expedited removal proceedings. Always update your address with USCIS if you have a pending application, or with immigration court if you're already in removal proceedings, because what we're seeing are more people getting detained solely because they did not update their address. You're required by law to update your address in certain situations. And if they mail you something and you don't respond, it gets flagged. And when they flag it, immigration authorities are put on notice that you didn't respond to your mail, and therefore that means you didn't update your address. The second thing I'll cover are bond hearings. So not everyone is eligible for bond, and I won't go into too much detail on this topic. Particularly those with certain criminal histories or even recent unlawful entries. But for those who are eligible for bond, it's really important to prepare a bond case thoroughly. You would want to demonstrate two things. One, that you are not a danger to community. How can you show this? You can say, hey, I don't have any arrests, no criminal record in this country or in any country. That could help prove that, and also that you're not a flight risk. It might be harder to prove this, but if you have, say, a US citizen, wife or husband or children, that sort of ties you down to this place, and so they would determine that you're not a flight risk. So for getting bond, you could try to get letters of support, proof of your address, maybe employment records if you had the lawful documentation to gain employment here, and evidence of community ties. The third topic I'd like to discuss are USCIS applications. So a USCIS applications could be an application to adjust your status, and some of those cases are turning into what we call EOIR cases, Executive Office of Immigration Review. Another way to call it is immigration court. So a lot of people who might be applying to adjust their status, like to get a green card, would be filing first with USCIS. But if their case gets flagged or denied, then we're seeing more recently that USCIS is referring their case to immigration court. and thereby placing the person into removal proceedings. And this is something that's not really known, but it's happening more and more. So it's important to stay on top of your correspondence with USCIS and never assume that silence means your case is okay. Once a notice to appear document is issued, then the case shifts to immigration court, and you're going to have to either try to apply for adjustment of status or whatever relief you qualify for there in immigration court. I'm also going to cover removal proceedings. So in other words, people who are being deported. So once you're in court, the process begins with a master calendar hearing. Usually, if you don't have an attorney at this point in time, you'll be given an attorney. I'm sorry, you'll be given time to locate an attorney. You won't be given an attorney, you have to find one. Once you're represented, or if you're unable to find an attorney in the time you were given, then you'll have to respond to the charges and allegations made against you. From there, the options of relief against deportation would vary depending on the situation. They could go from cancellation of removal, asylum if you fear persecution or returning to your home country, adjustment of status if you're eligible through marriage or having a US citizen daughter or son or father or mother, and also voluntary departure. And like any legal case, preparing for individual hearings take a lot of time and strategy. You'll need evidence, witnesses if you have any, and a statement. It's going to be kind of like a trial at the end. But another option would be called prosecutorial discretion. This is a request to the Department of Homeland Security attorneys to terminate or even dismiss your proceedings. But from what we have tried and what we're seeing, it doesn't look like they're taking those requests at this moment in time. Lastly, I'm going to cover travel issues, both international and inter-island. So there's a lot of people in Hawaii and in the mainland confused about whether they can travel safely. For example, if you have DACA or TPS or a pending green card application, you might be eligible for advanced parole, but traveling would be risky. So it's not the advice right now for certain people to travel. If you have a criminal record, you should definitely consult with an attorney to discuss whether it is very risky to travel or not. Anyone in removal proceedings should not travel internationally. And even inter-island travel can pose some problems for some undocumented individuals, especially if you're traveling through airports with a federal presence. So similar to avoiding getting detained, what you can do is have all your paperwork, carry your US passport or naturalization certificate, green card, or any proof of your lawful status or pending applications. If you're still unsure, it's best to consult with an attorney before any significant travel because everyone is going to be in a different situation. I would like to conclude that immigration law is ever changing and it changes with every administration. So the best thing we can do right now is to understand the current climate, plan accordingly, and if anyone is still confused, contact an immigration attorney. Thank you. I will hand it over now to Constancio.
All right. Thank you so much, Nanor. Thank you for providing all of those valuable information. Aloha, everyone. And first, I wanted to thank Lizelle and Mark and Philpro and Tayo for inviting us and allowing us to be a part of this discussion. My name is Constancio Paranal, and I'm here representing the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights. I currently serve as the managing director, and um, today I wanted to talk a little bit more about what's happening in immigration policy at the federal level, and essentially what that means here in Hawaii. And I'll share also where we are and what's at stake and what we are doing as a community and how we can build on that. So a little bit about HCIR. We are a statewide coalition of immigrants serving community organizations. We partner with legal service providers as well as social service providers, and we bring together people working in um, service, organizing, legal field to move immigrant justice and policy forward here in Hawaii. So we work with our allies like the ACLU of Hawaii, the Legal Clinic, Refugee and Immigration Law Clinic at the Richardson School of Law, as well as educators, providers, and members of the community across the islands. So if the legal clinic is focused on providing legal services or legal representation, and the ACLU of Hawaii is using legal action and constitutional law to challenge systemic injustice, HCIR's lane is really in policy and community mobilization. So um, we believe that our role is really creating that deep alignment with respect to rapid response, policy advocacy, and more importantly, public education. So today, I think my focus would really is more about federal policy shifts and what's changing and why it matters here in Hawaii. So I think one of the major immigration policy changes that we've seen is the elimination of enforcement priorities, where ICE is no longer following a priority system. Before, they were targeting only those that have a serious criminal record, but now everyone is really considered a priority, if you will. And ICE field directors face pressure to increase daily arrests or quotas. And why that matters is without clear priorities, that could result to racial profiling, wrongful arrests, and even community trauma, which we've seen has increased in our community. Even longtime residents, green card holders, like what Nanor had mentioned, and even US citizens, as we all know, are being swept up. So we've seen this with Filipino Americans here in Hawaii, with the Filipino teachers. I think it was May 7th, when Filipino teachers who were here legally on J1 visas were detained. And that was very traumatic for many of them. So like what Nanor had mentioned, many are now avoiding airports, hospitals, and some are even avoiding schools just out of fear. So this really puts families living in silence and uncertainty. The second policy shift that we've seen is this mandatory detention policies. There was this memo that was directed by ICE to detain essentially people throughout their immigration proceedings, even if they qualify for legal relief, or even if they win their case. So this is important because it shifts immigration system from civil processing to, if you will, mass incarceration. It denies people dignity, disrupt families, and pressures them to essentially self-deport rather than fight their case. And very important, particularly here for Filipino Americans, longtime residents with no criminal records may be locked up, and and that could disrupt their livelihood. It creates if you will, a chilling effect across immigrant communities. The other policy shift that I wanted to share about is this increased interagency surveillance and information sharing. And what it is that federal agencies now are sharing data with ICE, including the IRS, Medicaid, and I think in some cases even landlords. And there are concerns about information sharing from the DMV or school records. And um, again, very important because a lot of immigrants may be afraid to file their taxes, apply for health insurance, or even register for public services just out of fear. And that could fear of deportation or family separation. So um, very important to discuss that issue, especially for parents who may be seeking healthcare for their children and may opt not to do that just because, again, out of fear, and workers who are avoiding filing taxes or applying for aid, um, especially when they need it the most, right? It could isolate many of our kababayans, if you will. Um, the other is we've seen this as well, this dramatic increase in ICE budget and detention expansion. The federal budget now includes about 150 billion for immigration enforcement, and ICE detention capacity is being expanded, and I think to hold up to 100,000 people per day, and making it one of the largest law enforcement agency in the U.S. And it is concerning because it is a militarized approach to immigration. It diverts money from social services where it's needed and community care to essentially punishment and surveillance, and in some cases incarceration. So um, that is something that we're looking at and needs to be discussed throughout our community. And then there's this also, I think Nanor also touched on this coerced self-deportation, and um, people in detention are being told voluntarily to leave without being told that if they've been here more than a year, they'll face a 10-year ban from reentry. And I think that's one of those things that's not being communicated, right? It's all up there. They say that it's doing the legal thing, but it could also mean that it's a decade away from their family, right? If they self-deport. So in Hawaii, we've seen, um, these local ties of self-deporting because no one told them about the re-entry ban, and some are really misled or rushed to essentially sign documents without legal aid or legal representation. So, and then the last thing that I wanted to cover is the elimination of DHS civil rights offices. And, for people who have complaints of discrimination or abuse, all of those offices have been closed. And um, in Hawaii, detainees and interviewees now fear this mistreatment with no accountability measures or mechanism. And that's important, that we need to be vigilant and record those type of abuses. And this is where this partnership with the legal clinic and ACLU is very important. And taking a little bit more oversight on what's happening. So what we do here in Hawaii is, again, for us, it's really um, creating those campaigns together with other grassroots organization. And we're really heavily on policy and legal legislation, rather. And so we're now working on looking at bills for the next session to help with our immigrant communities, expanding healthcare, creating language access enforcement, and among others. And then I think obviously for us, it's really about putting or translating the legal work that the legal clinic is doing and other legal providers into advocacy, and put that political pressure uh, to our legislators and our congressional delegation, and ensure that immigrant communities are um, centered in all of our decisions, and that we continue to educate the public in terms of what their rights are, and how to mobilize the community. So those are essentially what I wanted to cover today. And I think this would be a good segue to Sergio on some of the know your rights.
Thanks, Constancio. Thanks, Nanor, and thank you again, Lizelle and Mark and FYLPRO and Tayo for kind of just putting just this conversation together. Again, my name is Sergio Alcubilla. I'm with the ACLU of Hawaii. The ACLU of Hawaii, it's a private, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's been protecting the civil rights and civil liberties of people in Hawaii since 1965. I know there's been a lot of Know Your Rights workshops and seminars, for a while, but it doesn't hurt to just kind of just briefly review and go over it a little bit. I know that there's people in this call that you speak to folks in the community, or people may have questions, and it's always just good to continue to hammer the point. We do have a right to be able to share what people's legal rights are. I think one of the comments from this administration that they were frustrated about was, it's now a educated populace. More and more people know their rights, and they're pushing back against some things that they're seeing that's not correct. And again, as a disclaimer, so this presentation and this whole conversation, it's only for information purposes. It's not legal advice, as Nanor had mentioned. You should definitely consult an attorney if you're arrested or if you're in removal proceedings. And again, in this administration, policies and practices are changing very quickly. We may be discussing one thing one week, and then the next week we are discussing something completely different. But again, that's been the nature of this administration, and we just ask people to be vigilant. We understand. I think the audience this evening, is community folks both here in Hawaii and some folks on the West Coast. But just some basic definitions. I think we've mentioned some of them already. But ICE, it stands for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's basically the immigration police inside the United States. CBP stands for U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. So that's Immigration Police at the border. And then DHS is the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. It's the parent agency for ICE. I was just trying to remember what the name was before they changed to DHS, but sorry, I know it's over 20 something years ago, but so just as a reminder, immigrants have rights. These rights apply inside the U.S., not to people in other countries, but this is kind of what makes I want to say Hawaii and continental United States special, is that regardless of immigration status, everyone does have rights. Yeah, thank you, Becky. INS, yes. But it might look slightly different for people in removal proceedings. And again, the importance of speaking to immigration practitioners such as Nanor and at the legal clinic. But we all have a right to, one, be silent. Part of the ACLU is making sure that we follow our Constitution. And then the Fifth Amendment in the Constitution is that, we don't have to answer questions about one, name or your place of birth or your immigration status. But, if you're a legal permanent resident, you do have to disclose it at the border. You don't have to answer questions about your criminal history. But it doesn't give you the right to provide false documents or provide wrong information. You will need to provide your name and your address during a traffic stop by police. Those are kind of some of the basics. We also have a right for unreasonable searches. So this is the Fourth Amendment. Basically, we have a right where people can't enter, the government can't enter your home without a warrant or without your consent. They can't search your car, your belongings without a warrant or without consent. And they can't search you without a warrant, consent, or arrest. You do not have to consent to a search. A lot of times, they ask very nicely, and, for folks, they just want to cooperate, right? And then they usually say, yeah, you can, look in the back of my car, or yeah, I have nothing to hide here. Go ahead and search my car. But again, you are protected by the Constitution. You don't have a right to consent to a search. There are, of course, exceptions. there's exceptions for emergency, for safety considerations, but again, as kind of just as a basic right, we have a right to be free from unreasonable searches. And then just in connection to that, we also have a right from unreasonable seizures. And again, that's under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. And seizure is stop, it's also being free from being stopped or arrested, right? So if you're arrested or detained, it requires probable cause. There's a reason to believe that there's some sort of violation of immigration law. I know what is kind of alarming at the moment is that they are using more racial profiling. That's been in the news lately. They'll try to get some sort of probable cause during interaction by asking questions or getting consent to search, but they shouldn't just profile you based on what you look like. But in reality, that is kind of what is happening, right? So for folks that have traveled recently, sometimes if you'll recall, the officer, when you come in, they'll basically ask questions, where have you been? What are you doing? Things like that. And usually kind of during that interaction, it can give them probable cause if it seems like, what you're saying is not adding up, or, there's reason to believe that you're not telling the truth. Next, we all have a right to due process, and basically that's covered in the Fifth Amendment of our Constitution. It's due process in a nutshell. It just means fair proceeding, right? You have a right to a hearing before deportation. You have a right to a lawyer. It may not be a court-appointed lawyer, but you do have a right to an attorney. You have a right to call witnesses and present evidence. Yeah, as Nanor had mentioned earlier, there is kind of this issue with, there's recent expedited removal orders, so you need to carry proof of residence carry proof of being a resident for over 2+ years. But we all should have a right to due process, right? It's an expectation that you just can't be picked up and sent to another country without basically going, in front of a judge and arguing your case. We all have a right to free speech and free association. It's First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. We have a right to protest and criticize the U.S. government or others. We have a right to join groups that protest and criticize the U.S. government. It prohibits retaliation for exercising our First Amendment rights. Helping people and telling people about their rights, we're not violating the law. And again, there's at the national level, there's concerns about executive orders about revoking visas, or even revoking citizenship for people based on ideology. So there are some alarming trends that we should be careful, that we should definitely watch for. But in general, we have a right to free speech and free association. And, a lot of other Know Your Rights presentations have covered this. If ICE does come to at your door, you can ask for a warrant. You should ask for a warrant. You must ask for a warrant, and please document. So those are the two things. If there's anything you take away from what I'm saying is, you have no obligation to comply with ICE absent a judicial warrant. So you may want to document officer activity rather than physically impede them. But, it is legal to film ICE regardless of your immigration status. Even if you're told to stop recording, you can continue to do so as long as you're not interfering with the arrest. And again, just be reasonable, right? But you do have a right to film police officers or officers in general in their line of work. You have to make sure that the warrant is signed by a judge. So a lot of times, or what we're seeing is that ICE rarely has a judicial warrant to enter someone's house. They may try to intimidate people into opening your door and consenting to them coming into your home. If ICE agents say they have a warrant, ask to see it. Right. I know there was a question, or Becky had raised the question about, the J1 teachers on Maui, especially for folks in Hawaii. How did that play out? Yeah, and again, it just shows that whether you're here legally or not, or you have some sort of status or not, we can be all target to kind of these interactions with ICE. With ICE. All right. Okay. And then just, yeah, is it actually a judicial warrant? So the difference between a judicial warrant and an immigration warrant. So with a judicial warrant, it's issued by court, it's signed by a judge, not an immigration judge, and it states the address or names of the person, right? And it also lists a time frame of when that judicial warrant can be enforced. An immigration warrant, it's usually, it's issued by DHS. You can look for the DHS seal label or for some sort of form number. It's usually signed by an immigration officer or an immigration judge. And it's not issued by a court. So those are things to watch out for. I kind of at the very basics is you can ask to see the judicial warrant. You can ask to, scrutinize the judicial warrant, and, immigration warrant is just not enough. Okay, and then ask and document questions. You want to note if ICE has refused to identify themselves or show a warrant. You want to take a photo of any document that ICE agents show you. We're telling people just don't resist, don't shout, just keep yourself and your family safe. At the end of the day, it is a scary time, right? But you want to keep yourself and your family safe. After the ICE agents leave, just take any photos of any damage, write down exactly what happened right away. And those are things that you can do to protect your family, your friends, your loved ones, and your neighbors. One of the things that we do want to mention, kind of just some current, I guess, some things that we're seeing. I think just recently, a few days ago, there was an executive order regarding birthright citizenship or revoking birthright citizenship. So, for those, right, that were born in the United States, we have this concept that you're automatically a U.S. citizen. But I think recently I know there's an injunction kind of stopping it at the moment, but there's an executive order that the Trump administration just basically, once they have the go-ahead, they want to show that they have some sort of plan in place, to be able to not grant citizenship just because you're born in this country. Here in Hawaii, I think that impacts a lot of our COFA nationals. So, for those on the call, COFA is our Compact of Free Association nationals. That's a special treaty that a lot of our island nations here in the Pacific have with the U.S. government, U.S. military, that in exchange for access through military, through the military, that folks from the islands of Palau, Micronesia, are able to come to the United States without a visa. Here in Hawaii, a lot of their children are now kind of the second generation, right? Even though their parents may not have U.S. citizenship, or there's not a path to U.S. citizenship for them, at least their children are born as U.S. citizens, and they're a large segment of our community here in Hawaii. Basically, what this executive order would do is it would revoke that right to the children born of our COFA brothers and sisters. So, this issue isn't just for the Filipino community. It also impacts a lot of our islander communities here in Hawaii as well. And then just another thing that we're seeing is just kind of this concept of revoking citizenship based on ideology. Just the threat that, if the administration doesn't agree with your viewpoint, that they can revoke your citizenship, especially for those that are naturalized U.S. citizens. So those are some things that the ACLU is looking at. The ACLU on the national front, they filed, I think, from day one of the Trump administration, over 120 legal actions since then. Here at the local front, really working with Constancio at HCIR and Nanor at the legal clinic and our other legal service providers that, are in the immigration space, both through providing services, through advocacy, through legislation, and through community organizing. So it really takes, all of us here, and, having these type of calls and conversations, it's just helpful to continue to keep our community safe. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Lizelle and Mark, and thank you again for this opportunity to talk more about some of the work that we do.
Thank you, Sergio, Constancio, and Nanor. So we do have some time for questions. So feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute. Does anybody have any questions?
So I'm just going to throw some,
Yep.
while people are thinking, I know there's a lot in our Filipino community that, they're supportive of the administration. They're supportive of kind of the recent enforcement practices, and that's perfectly fine, right? I mean, we're nonpartisan. We really talk to the policies, but I think, we should start having these conversations with our family members and friends who hold a different viewpoint. And why, we may feel like it doesn't impact us at the moment, or there's, from some of our, I guess, family members that, came here legally, there's this concept of like, oh, they should just get in line and do things legally. And, that's, they deserve whatever it is that they're getting. But I think it's important to have these conversations, with their family members, and just, share about the impact that, these policies are having. Um, we can't always kind of turn people's viewpoints to ours, but I think it's important just to have these conversations with folks, and especially in the Filipino community, that there's a lot that are supporters of this administration. Um, don't be afraid to have those conversations. I mean, they're hard conversations, but we need to have them.
Yeah, and if I could just add, what Sergio said, I see Andrea with the Philcom Center, and also Cami with Hawaii Workers Center. I think we really appreciate the work that they do as well, for our communities, and whether it's mobilizing or giving the platform to provide resources to our communities, whether it's related to immigration or just the basic needs that our communities need, our immigrant communities need. Also wanted to highlight the work that they do. So thank you for that.
Well, I have a question. I'm curious, what other questions or concerns or anxieties beyond what you've all covered that you are seeing that's very unique to Hawaii and the regions that you guys kind of oversee there? I know here in the mainland, when we think about immigration, oftentimes they think about land borders, and we know that's not the only thing that this topic encompasses so much more. So I'm curious if there's anything unique with the situation over there.
Nora had mentioned this earlier. It's just folks that are coming from other states. It basically, and then Nora, feel free to add, but it takes away kind of that support system, right? I think one of our friends here recently, Antillin, right? She was detained there in Washington State. And I think what was super helpful for her there was that she had, the support system of different groups that are on the ground. But I think what we're seeing is that when they take someone right away and they transfer them thousands of miles away, is that all of a sudden that support system is gone. So that's what they did with some of those that were being detained for their viewpoints on Palestine, and they were taking them, I think, all the way from Massachusetts and sending them all the way to Louisiana within 24 hours. Right. So I think that's one of the concerns. It's just, yeah, if someone is from California and then they bring them all the way here to Hawaii, it's so much harder, I think, to have that network of support. That's a concern.
Just to add to that, the reasoning why people are being sent to different federal detention centers. Sometimes we don't see a reason why a person was sent from A to B. We've seen people being, not very often, but sent from Hawaii to California. No ties to California whatsoever, no family there. It's just something that they have the authority and power to do. So the attorneys and family would just have to work around that huge barrier to communication with them. They won't be able to see them in person anymore, but sometimes the federal detention facility there might be willing and able to grant you access through video chatting with the person, but it requires scheduling and a lot of time beforehand. So that's one way to get around that issue. We're also seeing more and more people coming here rather than people here going elsewhere. And one of the reasons is because there's still space in our federal detention facility in Honolulu. And there's less and less space in the other federal detention centers, especially in California and Florida. And so that's another reason why we're seeing these movements for the detainees.
Yeah, just kind of related to what Nanor mentioned. I think that's just kind of specific to Hawaii or unique to Hawaii, our geographic isolation. Hawaii's geographic isolation makes ICE operations less visible, but also less accountable. And detained individuals are sometimes transferred off island, far from lawyers and their families, and there's no media spotlight or local resource for abuses that are happening during off-island detention centers. And so community support networks are harder to mobilize quickly. So I think that is just unique and kind of innate to Hawaii. And then of course, just the makeup of the immigrant population, mostly Filipino and Pacific Islanders. 1 in 5 residents in Hawaii are is an immigrant, nearly about 250,000 people. So, and Filipinos are the second largest ethnic group in the state, with many in healthcare, education, hospitality, and domestic work. And then Hawaii also has a high number of COFA or Compact and Free Association migrants from the Marshall Islands, from Micronesia and Palau, and with limited federal protections. So I think those are just part of what makes it unique or different.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat. I know that the US Supreme Court is allowing third country deportations for now. Have you all heard of any migrants who have experienced this, being sent to countries that are not their home countries?
I can answer a bit on this topic. So we're not seeing it being done yet, but we are hearing from ICE that it is in the works. And so it's possible it may happen to people in Hawaii's federal detention center, but so far I have not seen that happen just yet. It may be a matter of time though. So if, a person is going to go through that, that would be most unfortunate, because a lot of the times people might be sent to a country they don't have a passport to, they don't have family in, they don't know the language of, they've never been to. And so there's a lot of issue there surrounding how we can help those individuals. And a lot of the times, the people who might be in those situations are people who already have a deportation order, but were never deported for different reasons. Some people are not deported because the country is known to commit maybe certain human rights violations, and so they were not deported, or they never had a passport, so couldn't get deported. There's many different reasons.
And then Norisina had mentioned, there's a recent article about, some of our COFA migrants being sent to Guantanamo, not here in Hawaii, but, they're being rounded up on the continent. And of course, on the national level, there was the person that was through administrative error sent to El Salvador using the Alien Enemies Act. So, I mean, it is happening, right? But it's something we hope that is not going to happen here in Hawaii. And, I think it's, yeah, that critical that we continue to say something against it, because that's where due process is completely just erased. And I think that's a scary part for a lot of us. Sorry, I can't. I just want to use this opportunity also to talk about maybe some of the um, 287G agreements, or some of the agreements with their local law enforcement. I think folks may be calling us from different places, but right now, and Constancio, please feel free to chime in. With the goal of detaining 3,000 a day, with the goal of hitting the benchmarks of 1 million a year. ICE right now is being supercharged, right, with the recent appropriations bill. But they still can't meet those numbers unless they have cooperation from local law enforcement. And this is where basically there's some sort of cooperation with our local police departments to be able to help on the immigration front, and just joining HCIR and some of our service providers to basically push our elected officials, our local police departments, to basically say that we don't want to use the local resources to help on immigration enforcement. And so far, I think we've gotten commitments from some of our local police departments that they don't have these type of MOUs, or they don't have these type of agreements with ICE. But also the concern, I think, just we're such a militarized, I guess, island. I don't want to say mass, but I mean the military here is so strong that there was concerns already of using the local military bases as as another tool to help with enforcement. I think it was in the news recently that we were one of the pilot states where they were sending ICE to help with security at the Marine Corps bases or at our military bases. So I think just that fear of using the military or even our National Guard, basically to help on the enforcement side. I think those are other concerns that I think if you're in your own state, is just definitely be mindful for.
And then there's a question in the chat: has ICE been coming onto properties like churches and hospitals?
We just did a presentation the other day just for teachers. So in previous administrations, there's usually these type of sensitive places, right, where it would shock the conscience if you go into a church or if you go into a school. But this this administration has rescinded those type of guidelines. So it's very possible, that they may go to the on campus, on schools, to start picking people up. For churches, unfortunately, grateful we haven't seen anything yet. But Constancio or Nanor, I don't know if you're seeing anything.
Yeah, no, we haven't heard any, but we know, I would like to say 3 months ago or 2 months ago, there have been ICE sightings in businesses, and that's been very traumatic, and to a lot of business owners, small business owners. And so we've been trying to promote a lot of public awareness and public education on what to do, know your rights, especially when ICE goes to those types of properties.
Yeah, I haven't heard of them going on to property to like churches and hospitals, but parking lots, yes. Highways, yes. So, one way to protect, I think, a location is to have signs that say employees only or restricted access. Because once those signs are up, no one is allowed unless they have prior permission or consent from the property owner or business. Anyone can go into a Starbucks, but not anyone can go into the employees only section of a Starbucks. And so that's one way to prevent ease of access to other people. of course, if ICE comes in with a warrant, you can't really stop them with your no entry sign. But having those in businesses and hospitals, churches, I would say they could definitely help.
Hi guys, I
And
have a
it-
question about warrants. Can you hear me okay? Great to see all of you up there. The I don't know from what I've seen in the news, like what is the general reaction when ICE has asked for a warrant and they don't have one? Like, do they just? It seems like they're just plowing through anyways. Like, what's actually happening after that? Like, does it even matter, or is there pending litigation on that? And then I just wanted to follow up with something I put in the chat. I mean, I'm just like I like marketing, right, and things that are catchy. So I'm just wondering, if something that's like real simple and easy to share, like 3Ds, like document, like carry your documents, ask for the document, which was the warrant, and what was the third D? See, I can't even remember, but like keep the 3Ds in mind, and you could share it and repeat it, and it's like drum beat. Maybe you could layer Ilocano or Tagalog on top of it or something. But what was the third D? Document, warrant, keep your documents, and document, record it, take out your phone and record the whole thing. I think that's really brilliant. But yeah, back to my original question is like, what's happening about the warrants when they just plow through? Because it seems that's what I'm hearing.
I can talk a bit about this. So, and Sergio, Constancio, feel free to weigh in. When I see videos of people asking for a warrant, every time I think it's already too late. They already have the person in the van, they already have a hold of the person. I would say asking for a warrant would be the first thing a person should do. But often the person who is, the target of ICE doesn't know to ask for that. And it's always the bystanders or people with lawful status asking the ICE officer, where's your warrant? But at that point, the person's already in the van or in handcuffs or in the custody of ICE agents. So I think it's also definitely important to educate the community that they should ask for a warrant before anything or before granting access. Another thing that I think Sergio briefly touched upon as well was ICE can sort of trick you to open your door for them. They can say, hey, I think someone bumped your car a bit. You want to go take a look? And that sort of invites you to get out and sort of give them access to you as a person. So just be mindful of your surroundings and who you're talking to, and to be careful.
Sergio, Constancio, do you have anything else to add to that?
Maybe as we get on the tail end, just, what are the resources in the community, right? If you know someone that does get picked up, or if you know someone, that does need help, there is a hotline for those at the Federal Detention Center. That would be kind of a starting point. And then second, there are legal service providers in that hotline. Through that hotline, they should be able to route you to the right legal service provider.
Yeah. So we are at time. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this really important conversation. We know this is an ever-changing situation, so I think keeping tabs on all the updates and what you need to know is obviously crucial here. I am going to drop something in the chat. We would love your feedback on this webinar. After this event, we'll send a follow-up email with some links to resources as well as the recording to this. So feel free to share with family members and other community folks on this. So yeah, thank you again for joining us tonight, and we hope everyone stays safe, and hopefully, you know, things will, you know, just staying vigilant and keeping everyone in mind as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.